Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about connecting clauses with colons and semicolons. So, just as a review, again, this is the foundation to almost all things grammar. What makes an independent clause? So an independent clause has a subject, which is the person, place, or thing that does the action, a verb, the action the subject does, and it makes a complete thought. So the sentence makes sense when it stands on its own. So sometimes you have a subject and a verb, but it might not make a complete thought. So you need all three of these things to make an independent clause. And something we're going to talk about today is how to combine independent clauses together. So here's some examples of independent clauses. Sally ran. Sally is our subject, ran is our verb. Together it makes a complete thought. You could add Sally ran quickly or Sally ran to the store. Another example is my neighbor lent me his PlayStation. Neighbor is the subject, lent is the verb, but that cannot stand on its own. You need additional information to make a complete thought. My neighbor lent me his PlayStation. So you can combine two independent clauses with a semicolon. So a semicolon is used to combine two complete thoughts. Semicolons combine related complete thoughts without a conjunction. So just the semicolon instead of a period. Note that semicolons only combine related complete thoughts. What does this mean? What are related complete thoughts? That means these independent clauses need to connect to each other in some way. The information may be similar in topic, time, or action. Here's an example. Javier loves doing his homework. He always does it on time. So a semicolon is correct here because both these independent clauses have to do with Javier and homework. An incorrect use of a semicolon would be, Javier loves doing his homework. He is going to soccer on Saturday. While both of these have to do with Javier, these do not relate to each other. Homework almost never has anything to do with soccer, so this is not a correct use of a semicolon. Sometimes you can use conjunctive adverbs with semicolons. These are not coordinating conjunctions, so you have to use a semicolon with them. These are considered themo. So themos stand for therefore, however, also, moreover, or otherwise. So you can use one of these between two complete thoughts when used after a semicolon, and a comma comes on the other side. So if you look here, Mark really likes bananas. We have an independent clause that makes a complete thought. Semicolon. However, comma, he's not in the mood for one now. So we have our two independent clauses, and then we combine these with a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb or themo, comma, and then our second independent clause. Sometimes a conjunctive adverb or a themo interrupts a single thought. And if it interrupts a single thought, a semicolon may not be appropriate. So you have to include a comma on either side of it, such as Dave loved his dog, period, bringing it to class, comma, however, comma, was a mistake. So notice in the second independent clause, bringing it to class was a mistake. However here is interrupting that independent clause, so you would put commas on either side. So note that these aren't always used with a semicolon. They can be used to interrupt a single independent clause as well. So other conjunctive adverbs, just to pay attention to, are here. So you can always go back to this list. These can be used with semicolons or can interrupt an independent clause. These make great transition words to connect ideas together or to show relationships between your ideas. So now we want to talk about how a colon is used to introduce additional information. A colon is used to introduce, explain, or clarify additional information from the independent clause that comes before it. For example, I have to get a lot from the store. That is an independent clause. I is our subject, have to get is our verb, and a lot from the store helps complete the thought. However, we can also introduce a list of our items that we have to get from the store by using a colon. I have to get a lot from the store, colon. Bread, butter, eggs, cheese, flour, and Snickers. So here I'm introducing a list of things I have to get from the store. I can also use it to set up additional information. For example, Michelle is afraid of only one thing in this world. That is an independent clause and can stand on its own. However, I want to know what she's afraid of. So I can use a colon to introduce what she's afraid of. Clowns. Michelle is afraid of only one thing in this world. Clowns. We can also set up some options. We have two options. That is an independent clause, but it introduces more ideas. We have two options, colon, run or fight. So, besides adding additional information, you can also use a colon to combine independent clauses. But this is really tricky and it's easy to get wrong, so make sure you pay attention to this part. Use a colon between two complete thoughts when the second one explains or summarizes the first. So in the example here, this is my point. If we buy Judy a plane, she might take us for a ride. The second independent clause, if we buy Judy a plane, she may take us for a ride, clarifies or explains the information in our first independent clause. This is my point. We, as a reader, want to know what your point is, so the colon helps explain it. So note that second independent clause has to explain or summarize the first. So a semicolon combines two related independent clauses, but a colon is used only when the second independent clause explains, clarifies, or summarizes something the previous independent clause introduces. Here are some examples. I just want you to remember. Two can play at that game. So notice, I just want you to remember is an independent clause, but the reader might ask, what do you want me to remember? So the second independent clause helps clarify that. Two can play at that game. And it's still an independent clause because we have our subject, two, verb, can play, and at that game completing the independent clause. Colons can also be used to introduce quotations. Gary's always thought about what his grandmother said to him as a child. Colon, always be kind to those closest to you. So notice we have the independent clause, Gary's always thought about what his grandmother said, but we ask ourselves, what did she say? So the colon helps clarify that information by saying, she said, always be kind to those closest to you. Our third example is, the research is conclusive, colon, climate change is a reality. So climate change is a reality, is an independent clause, but it helps clarify what the research is that we're talking about. So here are your takeaways from this lesson. 1. Use semicolons to combine two independent clauses when they are related. You may know that they're related if they use conjunctive adverbs like however, therefore, accordingly, etc. Use colons to introduce additional information like lists or important clarifying information, or to combine independent clauses when the second complete thought explains, summarizes, or clarifies the independent clause that came before it. So if you improperly use semicolons or colons in your writing, please go back, edit them, and revise them. If you don't use semicolons or colons in your writing, incorporate them into your writing because it will make your writing more sophisticated and it may help the flow of your writing too.